Hi everyone, Professor King here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about intertextuality and intertextual research. I'm going to dive right into the share screen so that we can get these notes taken care of. They're pretty short, but I do want to make sure that we can address these ASAP. So one of the I got it, guys. One of the things that is required of this course is research. And I want to talk about 4 different types of research that are very common in the college humanities courses. These are not the only 4 that you'll find in college humanities courses, but they're pretty common and they're helpful, not just if you're an English major, but if you're taking any humanities or even like a social science type course, maybe even history and things like that. So we're going to be talking about 4, particularly in this class, which are historical, theoretical, biographical, and intertextual. And I'll talk about what each one of those mean as we get to it. Today, we're going to be talking about intertextual research. So what is intertextual research or what is intertextuality? Well, intertextuality is a basic principle or a mode of literary interpretation which holds that understanding the primary text, the text that you're looking at, is based on possessing critical knowledge of other key texts, okay? So like, let's say you're reading a novel and in that novel, another text is mentioned. Like for example, I teach Americana in my English 100 class, and you know, there are characters who are reading James Baldwin and William Faulkner and Alex Haley, and you know, the writer who wrote that book put those specific texts out of hundreds of thousands that she could have chosen for very specific reasons, because of, you know, thematically, content-wise, issue-wise, history, etc. They had to do with similar topics, right? So it's a way for a writer to reference another text in order to sort of help you to understand something that's going on in the text that writer is creating. Okay, so if you think about like, I don't know if anybody watched Sons of Anarchy. I know that show's a few years old now. There was a show called Sons of Anarchy a few years ago, all about this biker gang in this fictitious city called Redwood City, California. But basically, that was an adaptation. And an adaptation is a type of intertextuality because an adaptation directly references, right, the text it's adapting. In the case of Sons of Anarchy, it was Hamlet, because Sons of Anarchy is Hamlet, but with bikers. So that would be a form of intertextuality too, and I'll talk about some other ones we'll see in a moment. So intertextual research then, if we're going to do intertextual research, that's then involving a more thorough and deeper understanding of a text by studying the connections that can be inferred between that text and another. And you will see this in humanities courses all over the place. A lot of students think, especially in the 100 levels, that when they do research, they have to do, you know, a scholarly journal article. But in literature, what you could do a lot of times is you can use other literature as your research. I remember when I was in grad school, I was writing an article, a cultural studies article on the television show True Detective. And the first season, there were all of these, some subtle, some not so subtle references to things like H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, and there was a book called The King in Yellow, these sort of, you know, early 20th century horror and science fiction texts that were referenced in this television show in various ways. And so part of the research that I did was actually just reading those texts, right? Reading Call of Cthulhu, reading The King in Yellow, and then seeing what the connections were being made and why. So that's intertextual research. Okay. So one example that we're going to be seeing this week is looking at I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman, and then later Langston Hughes's I Too. The first line in Hughes's I Too is actually I Too Sing America. And so we can see just from that first line that it is a direct response, right? Not just a reference, but an actual response to Whitman's poem. And as you read the two poems, knowing that, you know, that Langston Hughes wrote his a few decades later, you can see, right, the intertextual connections that you can make. And intertextual, you know, if we think about the word, inter means between, textual means text, right? And a text can be anything. It can be, again, a short story, a novel, a poem, a film, a work of art, a video game, etc., right? So that would be one way we would do intertextual research, is we would go back to Whitman's poem, we would see what Whitman says about various groups or voices in America singing, and then we would say, well, what is Hughes getting at then, right? So that's one example in our class. Another one that I always like to share, especially because like the 90s are back in a big way, which makes me feel like I'm 3 million years old, is one of my favorite songs from the 90s is a song by Ice Cube, a former member of NWA. And the song is called Bop Gun. And the reason why I love this song is not just because I was like an awkward middle schooler when it came out and I thought it was like super cool listening to it. I was not cool at all. I was like the least cool, like still clearly I'm not cool at all. But not just that, but also as I got older, I realized that every single line in the song is like literally taken from like a 70s or 80s funk song. So you have lines from Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's Ain't No Mountain High Enough. You have lines from various Parliament, Funkadelic, and George Clinton songs. You have lines from the Double Dutch Bus. You've got all kinds of stuff. Malcolm McLaren is another one that Tom Tom Club, like all these artists, all their songs, Tom Tom Club's Genius of Love, every single line in Ice Cube's Bop Gun is like literally a cut and paste from those songs and even more songs, and then put into this new song to create a whole new narrative. And so you have to think of like why that is, right? Why a guy, right, who's from South Central Los Angeles in 1992, right on the heels of the LA uprising, right after the brutal beating of Rodney King in 1992. That's my dog Lionel, by the way. Why is this guy who comes from this area in which this brutal beating and this uprising occurs, why does he then write a song a year later that basically puts the lines from all of these like party time, get together, have fun, forget your troubles kind of funk songs, as sort of a historical contextualization or a response to these things, right? Well, because he wants people to realize that, as he says, we are one nation under a groove, right? Like we're not all these disparate sort of factions. Lionel, stop. Sorry, my dog's whining. But that if we can just kind of look to our recent history, we can see from all these old songs that like we can get along, right? Like that things can be okay. So when we do intertextual research, right, it's not just about looking at the text being studied, right? It's not just about looking at Americana, or looking at I Too, or looking at Bop Gun, right? It's about looking at the text that they reference, right? It's about looking at I Hear America Singing. It's about looking at all those songs from the 70s and 80s that Ice Cube references in Bop Gun. It's about all, you know, it's about the text that's being alluded to and why, right? Why those texts? What message is this person trying to say by including those texts, right? So you don't just look at the primary text, you think about the references, the allusions to the other texts, then you think about those texts. What are they about? What's their theme? What are their topics? What do they mean? And then you think, well, what's the connection, right? What's that bridge that Hughes is deliberately trying to have us see between Whitman's I Hear America Singing and what Hughes is witnessing as a Black man in mid-20th century America, right? What is the bridge? So why that reference, right? And if you think about hip hop music, if you think about, I mean, hip hop music more so than any other genre, maybe like R&B, but like, if you think about hip hop and R&B, what do they all do? Not all, that there's, you know, I want to refrain from absolutist language, but what do the majority of these songs do? Well, they sample, right? They sample either beats or lines in the case of Bop Gun, or hooks or whatever from previous songs. And sometimes it's just to be cute, right? But sometimes it's to use that original text, that original song, to help contextualize or strengthen the message of the text they're creating, right? Of the song they're creating. So keep that in mind, right? That if you're a big hip hop fan, if you're a big R&B fan, if you're a big funk fan, those references to earlier songs, right? That's intertextuality. Like that's an example of it happening in the song. So those are the notes. I think that's it, right? Yeah. Those are the notes on intertextual research. As always, I'm going to take it off share screen. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to message me. I'm here. And otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful day, night, whatever in cyberspace. Bye.